Further debate? I recognize the member from Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the Parliamentary Assistant to Indigenous Affairs, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to rise today to speak on behalf of not only my ministry, but also to convey the words of the minister that I represent, the member from Kenora Rainy River, and speak in support of the member from Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston's motion to establish a Standing Committee on Indigenous Relations. Our government is committed to developing strong relationships with Indigenous communities, and we understand the value of involving First Nations and Métis people in the decisions that impact their communities. The mandate of Indigenous Affairs Ontario focuses on promoting Indigenous economic development opportunities, improving the quality of life for Indigenous people, and meeting Ontario's legal obligations in respect of Aboriginal and treaty rights and land-related claims. And this work is a priority for our government. We're committed to uphold our constitutional duty to consult with Aboriginal communities. We believe that when the consultation is done in a clear and transparent way, we create a more stable business environment, develop strong relationships, and create economic opportunities. The establishment of the Standing Committee and the issues of concern it is intended to address would complement the work that's already happening, not only in Indigenous Affairs Ontario, but across our entire government. And today I'd like to highlight just some of the few initiatives that are currently underway. Madam Speaker, our government understands the socioeconomic gaps that persist for Indigenous people in Ontario today, and we want a future where all communities in this province are able to achieve prosperity. And we're partnering with ministries on a wide range of policies and programs that will help improve economic development opportunities for Indigenous people. For example, the teams at Energy, Northern Development and Mines and Natural Resources and Forestry are moving forward on revenue sharing from mining, forestry and aggregates to help Indigenous communities share in the benefits of resource development. In fact, the first payment of mining and forestry revenues under the Resource Revenue Sharing Agreement was made just this past December. Earlier this week, Premier Ford announced support for an environmental study for a road that would link remote First Nation communities in the Ring of Fire. This area is currently accessible only by winter ice roads or by air. To help support growth in the mining and the construction and in other skilled trades, this road is being developed. The Minister of Infrastructure and the Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines are currently developing Ontario's 5-year strategy to improve and expand broadband, digital services and cellular access in unserved and underserved areas, including advancing broadband access for First Nations. Last October, Premier Ford announced a $30 million investment in the Matawa Broadband Project to provide modern telecommunication services to 5 Northern First Nation communities, all the while supporting job creation and opening up more economic opportunities. We're collaborating with the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development on engaging Indigenous organizations in apprenticeship modernization, integrating social assistance employment services into the Employment Ontario system, and transforming Ontario's employment services. Funding through the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs Economic Development Programs and Indigenous Economic Development Fund and the Indigenous Community Capital Grants Program is providing support for training, job creation, community infrastructure, and consultation capacity in communities. Madam Speaker, through these initiatives and many others, we're providing better opportunities for employment and community success. Together, we're making a meaningful difference in the lives of Indigenous people so they can share fully in the prosperity of this province, not only today, but tomorrow as well. We're also very focused, Madam Speaker, on improving the quality of life for Indigenous people across this province. This involves working collaboratively across multiple ministries in diverse areas, including health, mental health, education, child and family services, and justice. For example, our $3.8 billion investment over the next 10 years in mental health and addiction strategies includes nearly $13 million annually towards culturally appropriate mental health and addiction services, supports, and programs for Indigenous families and their communities. Earlier this week, the Minister of Health announced a mental health and addictions plan, which will provide continued support for grassroots-driven solutions to meet the unique needs of Indigenous communities. And we're working closely with the Minister of Community, Children and Social Services and the Solicitor General to combat human trafficking. Together, we're developing a strategy to address this heinous crime and help keep Indigenous women and girls who are at particular risk safe. Indigenous women and children deserve to live in an environment that enables them to thrive. Tackling the systemic causes that put Indigenous women and girls at a disproportionate risk of violence remains a top priority for our government. As we pursue our plan to build safe and healthy communities, we'll continue to work with the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and urban Indigenous organizations to address this critical issue. We're also focused on protecting Indigenous youth from the issues of violence, racism, and suicide. And to address this, we've invested in preventative services on the ground in First Nation communities focused on life promotion skills. These include community-led, youth-focused initiatives that promote leadership, build pathways to wellness, and address service needs. We want to support youth and families on their healing journey and to connect youth to their land and their culture. Our government has made a firm commitment to providing children in care with culturally appropriate supports. And this past summer, we announced the designation of Nagdawenmog Banujiog as Indigenous Children's Aid Society. It's the 12th Indigenous society to be designated. Together, we'll work to improve outcomes and opportunities for Indigenous children and youth. We're coordinating efforts with other ministries to improve the quality of life for people living in First Nation reserves. For instance, we continue to work closely with the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks to influence federal policies and operational approaches related to drinking water on reserves. And at Energy Northern Development and Mines, we're supporting the development of the Watay Power Project. Once completed in 2023, it'll be the largest Indigenous-led infrastructure project in Canada and most far-reaching First Nations grid connection effort in Ontario's history. The project will connect 16 remote First Nation communities to the provincial electric grid and provide over 14,000 First Nations people in northwestern Ontario with a clean, reliable and affordable supply of electricity. Madam Speaker, I'd like to also briefly mention our important work around land claims and treaties. Our government strongly believes that resolving Indigenous land claims and land-related matters through negotiations allows the province to meet its legal obligations and make a meaningful difference in the lives of all Ontarians. In 2018, working in partnership with the federal government, our government settled a long-standing dispute related to the 1923 Williams Treaties, and together issued a joint apology for the negative impacts these treaties had made on the Williams Treaties First Nations. As of January 2020, there were 74 active land claims in Ontario, 10 in research and assessment, 53 in negotiation, and 11 in implementation. Currently, Ontario is working with 90 Indigenous communities to resolve land claims and land-related matters. Successful negotiations bring economic benefits for Indigenous and neighbouring communities, creating opportunities and potential new business partnerships. We're working to resolve historic grievances through fair, respectful and meaningful agreements that advance the social and economic sustainability of Indigenous
Order,
communities.
please.
Mr. Speaker, our government recognizes that treaty relationships are just as relevant today as they were when those treaties were first signed. Last November, Ontario marked the 4th annual Treaties Recognition Week by supporting opportunities for people to learn more about treaties and their place in the province's history and heritage. Our government worked with Indigenous and education partners to deliver more than 200 treaty awareness events in schools, universities, and public libraries. Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers delivered teachings and provided their personal perspective to help deepen understandings of treaties. Making treaty relationships real and meaningful is important for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike. Promoting awareness and understanding of treaties helps to advance us along the road of reconciliation and ensures everyone can participate in Ontario's prosperity. Despite all that we're doing, we know there's still more to be done. Our government will continue working together with all of our partners, inside and outside of government, to improve the economic and social well-being of Indigenous people. We know that by effectively working together, we'll meet these needs, and we welcome every opportunity to continue to collaborate on this vital work. Madam Speaker, in closing, I'd like to reiterate our government's support for the MPP from Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston's motion to establish a standing committee on Indigenous relationships. Miigwech, Marci, Niyawan. Thank you.